As one of the fastest growing towns in Arizona, Queen Creek might also be the state's best kept secret. Despite rapid development throughout the valley, the town of Queen Creek has retained its unique character, the convenience of the city with the comfort of the country. It's a rare blend that reflects the town's deep connection to its roots. To understand those unique roots, you have to go back in time before there was a Queen Creek, back to a time when 8 families lived and farmed in what was known as the Rittenhouse community.
My name is Frances Brandon Pickett. I'm the daughter of Charles Brandon. Mr. Rittenhouse was one of the larger farm owners out here. By shipping his apricots by rail, they had to have a name for the siding, and so they put Rittenhouse on the railroad siding. So we were known as the Rittenhouse community.
My name is Dave Salge, and I'm currently serving as the president of the Santan Historical Society. Charles Rittenhouse was the owner or manager of Queen Creek Farms. He brought people in to help him run the farms, to keep the diesel machines running, to keep the wells going, to help with irrigation, with the planting. And then as he was successful, it brought other families in to do the same, like the Sossaman and the Hawes family and the Germain families. These were hardworking people that were essentially farmers and looking for better lives.
My name is Jamie Sossaman, son of J.H. Sossaman. Part of the family decided about 1910 that they would come to the Phoenix area. They put their name in the hat, and they were lucky, and they got 2 homesteads. If you drew a name, you had 5 years to what they call prove up on the land. You had to have a building that you could live in. Didn't have to have any doors or windows. You had to have water out here because you couldn't live without water. You couldn't farm without water. My son, ourselves, and my daughter still live on the original homestead.
The community was really just a trust and a collaboration like you'll find in a lot of small farming communities across the United States.
My name is William Brandon, son of Charles M. Brandon. I followed my dad out here because I was only 4 months old at the time. Didn't have much choice in the matter. We got off of the train in Rittenhouse Switch. Luckily, he was able to go to work the next afternoon. He needed to because he only had 40 cents left in his pocket.
When my mother decided it was time for me to be born, my father went to the gin over here. It was the only telephone out here, and he called Dr. Gilbert of Chandler. My father was to shine his headlights of his car towards the railroad track, and the doctor would see them, and he would wind himself through the desert until he reached the house. And I was born about 8:30 at night on November the 29th, 1927.
My name is Antonia Aldecoa Valenzuela, daughter of Waldo Aldecoa and Rosenda Aldecoa. I was raised in Queen Creek. My parents came in 1929, and there was 16 of us. My dad was working for the Ellsworths. He was the foreman, and my mom stayed home to raise us.
We had no inside plumbing when I was a kid, and my mother heated water over an old washpot.
We slept outside a lot in the summertime. We had to carry our mattress in when it rained.
Life on the farm, it might have been dusty and rugged to a lot of people's thinking, but it was an enjoyable life.
Well, it was a nice place. It was a home to us.
As kids, we'd go hunting rabbits and whatever else that suited our fancy.
Because there really weren't any road signs or any directional signs, people that had to deliver oil or deliver supplies Truckers would need to find their way to the different family homes. So they used a system of really naming the roads after the dominant family or the dominant farm that was along that path. This building was built in 1925, and it was the first school in the community. It was called Rittenhouse Elementary School. Later used, they were just referred to it as Old Main, but we still lovingly call it the Rittenhouse Elementary School.
I attended through the 8th grade. It was just the 3 classrooms. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd was in one room. The 4th, 5th was in another. And the 6th, 7th, and 8th was in this room over here on this side. And then I went to Chandler High School. Come back in 1969 and started as a teacher's aide at $1.77 an hour. I taught 19 years altogether. When they started building new schools, Monty Niven, I think he was responsible for that. He called me one day and said, well, we decided that we were going to name them after pioneer families, and said we wanted to name one for you and your family. Never did I think of, when I went to school here, that anything like that would ever happen.
Everybody looked out for everybody. If somebody needed help, we were there. It didn't make any difference what religion you were. We were a big family. And that's what we loved about it.
As sons went off to war for the farmers, they needed to find an alternative to fill the need in working the field. So they established a satellite POW camp at what they called the Rittenhouse switch, or the Rittenhouse siding. So it was on Ellsworth and Rittenhouse, right by the tracks, just on the north side of the tracks. It was really a tent camp, so it's not like the wood buildings. They put up tents, and they would move POWs through this camp from Papago to work the fields.
I was probably 14 or 15, and one of the German prisoners was kidding me about, did I have a girlfriend? Well, I really didn't have one, but a very attractive young lady that my family knew had given my folks a picture that said, "Love, Audrey." So I went home, got this picture, brought it back to the potato shed, and said, "This is my girlfriend." Well, they were very impressed, and they passed it around. Unfortunately, when the workday was over, we couldn't find the photograph. And so I always kidded Audrey Ryan, who lived in Chandler. I said, "You were a pinup girl for the German army." So
At evening when they got off from work, they would be marching, singing in German, and it would just make your hair stand on the back of your heads to hear them. It was beautiful to hear them sing.
Homesteaders found the fertile valley below the Santan Mountains perfect for growing citrus crops, vegetables, cotton, pecans, and more.
My name is Steve Sossaman, son of James and Sue Sossaman. My grandparents farmed through the Depression. We provided a lot of jobs for people who came from the Dust Bowl on their way to California. Hundreds. We had a tent city next to our farm because we had a lot of labor in planting and harvesting vegetables.
My name is Mark Schneff. I am the son of Ray and Thora Schneff. My grandparents, Jack and Maud Schneff, were farming in what's now downtown Mesa. And in 1941, my grandfather heard about some cheap desert land in a little place called Rittenhouse. And so he came out and bought a section of ground, 640 acres, from the Ellsworth brothers. My grandmother came out with my grandfather, and she wasn't quite as excited. So my dad was the oldest of 7 kids. He had just turned 19, was engaged to my mom, and it was decided that Ray and Thora would be the first family members to actually come out and develop it into a farm.
My name is Paul Gardner, grandson of Taylor Gardner. My grandfather saw an advertisement for a gas station operator, so he interviewed with Leo Ellsworth, who was one of the Ellsworth brothers, on running the gas station. Leo found that his talent was as a bookkeeper and accountant, and he hired my grandfather Taylor to run the farming operations on the accounting and bookkeeping side.
My name is Newell Barney, and my father's name is Arthur Barney. There was a lot of good land in Mesa and around Mesa that was just perfect to farm and at a reasonable price, but it was more than we could afford. So we bought the desert land because it was cheaper and we could afford it, and it felt like we could make it work. My wife and I bought at the time 960 acres from Germain Brothers, who homesteaded it, and we paid $35 an acre. We moved over here in 1948 and then started farming after that.
My name is Catherine Barney. I'm the daughter of Nushin Meacham. We brought our little Gail, 6 months old, that came over and started farming. It was a very unusual experience, but it was a good one.
It was pretty isolated back then. All around us was desert. We had to even build the road to get into where we had purchased the land to start clearing it and get it ready to farm.
Well, growing up in Queen Creek was really kind of a Mayberry experience. I mean, Queen Creek was an amazing place to grow up, an incredible sense of community.
My name is Gail Barney, son of Catherine and Newell Barney. The early memories of Queen Creek was as a community that was united. There wasn't a lot of us, and so anything that happened, good, bad, social, we all did together. We all took pride in the community, making it the best we could. It was very special.
Queen Creek remained the same for decades. Growth was slow. Farms were passed to the succeeding generation. Then the entire Phoenix Valley began to experience unexpected and rapid growth. Some aspects of this growth threatened the old way of life.
I remember getting a map of the valley, and on it, one of the things that was shocking to me was to look at all the surrounding communities of Chandler, Gilbert, Tempe, and Mesa, and to figure out where their boundaries were at the time and how close they were to Queen Creek, and to figure out where the growth patterns were going, and to figure out that we were going to be in the middle of growth.
Paul Gardner and I were driving one day and we saw a little notice out in front of my farm, and it was from the county. It was the county flood control. And they were going to draw a new county flood control map, which took in a big portion of Schneff Farms. And I got really concerned, and Paul and I went down to a county planning and zoning meeting and kind of expressed our concern about all of this, which they paid attention to. What really sort of pushed us along was when Mesa and Gilbert came out and decided to strip annex large portions of this community. And it was allowed back in those days by state law.
My name is Tom Freestone. I served on the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors representing District 1 from 1978 through 1992. I never did believe in annexation wars, and that's what was taking place, because you bite off more than you chew at the time, and a lot of times those citizens in that area pay the price.
The town of Gilbert annexed over to the east side of Power Road. And the city of Mesa came down and annexed all of Williams Air Force Base, and they came down, I believe it was to Pecos Road. And it was a wake-up call. It was like, okay, they're gonna come out here and they're gonna basically divide us up. Part of it's gonna be in Gilbert, part of it's gonna be in Mesa. We're not going to be able to really decide what our future's gonna be.
We thought to ourselves, Mark, Paul, people in town, Kiwanis group, would we be better off just sitting still and waiting to be rolled over by another community, or should we attempt to control our destiny?
We decided that the best way of doing that was to incorporate and become our own town.
On July 25, 1989, local voters cast ballots to decide the fate of Queen Creek. To get to that moment, 5 local residents who came to be known as the Queen Creek Five had gone against the odds, working to change state laws to allow Queen Creek to repel the annexations that had taken portions of land considered by residents to be a part of their community. The 5 were Robert Eberly, Ralph Pomeroy, Mark Schneff, Steve Sossaman, and Paul Gardner. Tom Murch and John Wharton were also very instrumental in the incorporation effort.
The authority lies with the County Board of Supervisors in this state. And being it was in my district, it is up to me to put it together with the help of this group and to present it before the board, because it needed approval of the body of the whole in order for it to become actually incorporated. And we had some rough sledding going through that.
They were young men, and they hadn't done anything like this before, and so they were up against some experienced people. And it was a challenge, but they were up to it.
My name is Sue Sossaman, and I'm the daughter of Lloyd and Hildred Peters. Between the three of them, they had the knowledge and the courage and the contacts to make it happen.
My dad was in the legislature from '68, and then Speaker of the House, and then he ran and went to the Senate. I went down to the legislature all the time with my dad. I knew everybody down there.
State law tells you exactly what you have to do when you incorporate a community, and they don't make it easy because that law was written by cities and towns. A big portion of their budget comes from state revenue sharing funds. So if there are more cities and towns that incorporate, that piece of pie gets spread out a little bit thinner and they get less money overall. So they're not real anxious to see neighbors or new cities and towns take place.
Part of the state statute is if a new town wants to incorporate or a new area, they have to go to the surrounding communities that are within 6 miles of their proposed boundaries and get them to sign off on it. And if one of them says no, you're done. And our two major ones were Mesa and Gilbert.
Because of the strip annexation, we felt like that we wanted to push that back. So we had a meeting with the town manager and the mayor of Gilbert, and we told them our concerns, and they basically said, you know what, we don't care.
So then we looked at each other and said, we only have a window of opportunity here, so Plan B is going to effect. Help craft a bill down to the legislature that said, all the strip annexations are going away statewide.
We introduced that legislation. The cities and towns didn't think it would go anywhere because they thought they had enough influence down at the legislature to put a stop to it, but it got traction.
All the rural areas in Arizona were saying, yeah, big cities are taking over, we don't like them, yeah, we're on board with that.
Steve Sossaman and I went down day after day after day, knocking on doors and meeting with legislators on both sides of the aisle, both parties, in both the House and in the Senate.
There was so much pressure from all the other surrounding communities because what the bill stated was that they had to go back prior to where they had annexed, which means that Gilbert would have lost about 40 square miles of their territory. Mesa would have lost, at the time, Williams Air Force Base and the GM Proving Grounds, and they would have had to go all the way back up to Baseline Road.
We got that law changed, and Gilbert agreed to roll back the strip annexation. They also agreed to allow us to incorporate. Once Gilbert agreed to our incorporation, and we went to the city of Mesa to get their approval, all of a sudden they had doubts and they had second thoughts.
Fortunately, I was in a position at the state legislature, and Mesa was always wanting things, and we had a little horse trade going on there, and you get what you want, but Queen Creek gets what it wants, and finally they capitulated and said, okay.
We did enter and we did sign a what I call the blood oath, of where we went in and promised that we would never annex over the next 5 years across Germain Road. And if we did so, it was going to be at a detriment to us personally at $1 million per mile. There's about 5 square miles that was on there. And so I think that's probably the first time in Arizona history that 5 people signed their life away, hoping that a future council in the next 5 years wouldn't try to annex anything across Germain Road.
The town of Queen Creek, with its small population, could not take care of its roads and its law enforcement.
You know, one of the questions I had early on was, well, what have other communities done? And you find out that, you know, the town of Goodyear had, you know, maybe a couple of their mile roads that surrounded them on the periphery that were never annexed in. And you find out, well, so was Surprise, and so was Peoria, and so was Glendale. And so my question was, well, if you keep 4 roads out, why can't you keep them all out? And nobody had ever done that.
Paul Gardner was the quintessential backroom technocrat, and he was the guy that crafted the whole idea of incorporating 40 square miles and none of the roads.
Now, if you don't think that met with fire and fury at the county down there, says, what are we going to do? You're going to leave, we have to enforce it with the sheriff office at our cost? I says, we're doing that now. So we're going to have to do the roads down there at our cost? I says, we're doing that now. I says, if we get them involved in doing this and have their own community, within several years, they will take this all off our backs. In the meanwhile, we don't have planning zoning, we don't have permitting, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how it came about.
And eventually, the majority of the roads are now all inside of the Queen Creek boundaries, but it happened when we had the population and we had the money to take care of them.
That was brilliant stroke of genius by Mr. Gardner.
We had put our neck out on the line. We'd pulled in a lot of political chips along the way, and all of a sudden we have to have a vote. And I remember working the phone banks and trying to get, hopefully get people to vote on this and vote the correct way. And it wasn't until that night where the votes were counted and that we were successful that you had this big sense of relief that we'd really got it done.
The vote to incorporate as the town of Queen Creek passed by more than 2-1. The town was officially incorporated on September 5th, 1989, and on September 20th, Steve Sossaman, Tom Murch, John Wharton, Sally Davis, June Callender, and Paul Gardner were sworn in as the first town council, working beside Mark Schneff, who served as the town's first mayor.
Mark really instigated this and brought them together, but they all pulled together. These are some of the finest young men I have ever seen in action. And I certainly wanted to be involved on the first council, and I thought that Mark would make a nice fit as the first mayor.
It was a really exciting day for me. I mean, I had been working on this along with others for 3 years, and there were lots of times when we thought the fight was over, but we never gave up.
You couldn't wipe the grins off our face. It was years of work and pretty exciting. So you just enjoyed the moment.
Tom Freestone, of course, swore us in as town members of Gilbert rather than of Queen Creek. We all corrected in that.
It was a kind of like a new beginning for all of us, and it was like, now what? We've done all this, now what are we going to do with it?
Now you got down to the real work and what you had to do, and it was all pointed out. I mean, state statutes are clear what you have to establish, and you have to get a clerk, and you have to find a place for an office, and we did it in the back of the water company, and with the ultimate low-budget town.
The next year to 3 years was a lot of work on setting up the government for the town. Acquiring the church was a big deal for I think having us a landmark.
The original price, I think, was pretty high. It was over $700,000, and there was no way we could do that. So we went through a round of negotiations with them.
We needed to negotiate fairly, but we also needed to be able to afford to pay for it.
And we finally made an offer that the church accepted of $250,000.
Most people, don't realize that there was 11 acres that went with the property.
The price was great, but it was also on terms. The church would carry us because we didn't have $250,000 cash as a community.
Mark was quite ingenious on coming up what I call the 10-year note based on a 30-year amortization, and made it to where we could afford to pay it without really hurting the town's budget at all.
They knew exactly why they were here and how they wanted this town to grow.
I think we had the sense from the very beginning that because it was new, we were setting the tradition for the community. That what we did in the beginning would be something that people would look at and that people would emulate, and that it would carry on.
It's really remarkable that that vision has continued on, and through all the different sets of councils and mayors that we've had, that they've continued to share the vision of what I call the Founding Fathers.
There were people who took initiative, took the time to lay a foundation for a successful community. And there are people like that, and they did it for nothing for themselves other than sense of community, pride, and helping to build something that they could live in and be part of and share with whoever came afterwards. And those people do exist, and I'm thankful for it.
The town of Queen Creek has flourished from roots set deep in its rural desert past into what today is one of the most innovatively planned, family-friendly hometowns in Arizona. Queen Creek strives to honor its past, to manage its present, and to provide a future in which families and businesses can thrive and grow. Residents from some of those original 8 families still live and work right here alongside others who have come to value the unique character of Queen Creek, Arizona.
I've lived here all my life. I love Queen Creek, from the dirt roads and from the beginning and everything else. And I still love Queen Creek with the hustle and bustle and everything that's going on. It's my home. I've been here almost 70 years.
Anytime there's a fire or a death or a disaster of any kind, the people come and help. And that's what I think is so special about Queen Creek. People care, and people help, and people work towards making things better.
Our family doesn't want to move. The children have opportunities to go somewhere, but they don't want to. They want to stay right here. They want to have their families grow up in Queen Creek. It's just a good place to be.
I've always called this my home. I still think this is my home.
It's a sense of responsibility because, you know, the Powers have sold and moved on. The Rittenhouses, the Germains, you know, most of those people are no longer around. But you get to tell people, oh, I live in the QC.